Have you heard? How man-made and natural noises affect bats' foraging behavior. To some degree, wild animals have adapted their communication systems to cope with man-made noise. Birds call louder in big cities or sing more often during quieter periods. Amphibians and dolphins alter the frequency range of their communication signals to avoid overlap with ambient noise. But noise pollution also decreases birds' breeding success and alters whales' ranging and acoustic abilities. Environmental noise may also interfere with some species' ability to detect prey. For example, owls and primate insectivores listen for their prey's rustling noises. Likewise, some bat species listen for insect movement on the ground or in vegetation. However, the effects of noise on wildlife foraging ability have not been studied previously. To evaluate these effects on bats' foraging abilities, researchers from the University of Tübingen and the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology in Germany tested whether bats would avoid noisy environments while foraging and whether the frequency and interval of the sound would affect the degree of avoidance. The researchers chose to evaluate greater mouse-eared bats because these passive listening bats find food by listening for their prey's rustling sounds, rather than by using echolocation to intercept flying insects, as some other bat species do. The researchers constructed a sound-absorbing wall to partially divide a large flight room into two equal-sized foraging compartments that contained a loudspeaker and a continuous supply of mealworms. The 7 young male bats were first accustomed to the flight room during a training phase, then tested individually in the dark during the times they were naturally active during 3 8-day periods. For each test, one compartment was quiet and one compartment played one of 3 sounds on a speaker: traffic noise recorded near a segment of the Autobahn on dry, windless days, strongly moving reed vegetation, and broadband digitally generated white noise. Each of the 4 stimuli were played once in each compartment for each bat, and the mealworm reward dishes were placed in different spots within the compartments to avoid place conditioning. The tests were filmed and the investigators recorded the bat's flight time in each compartment, the number of flights into each compartment, and the mealworm capture events per compartment. The results showed that when both compartments were quiet, the bats used both sides equally and were equally successful in capturing mealworms. But when one compartment was noisy, the bats foraged more on the quiet side. Surprisingly, the bats did not completely avoid the noisy compartments and were still somewhat successful in finding prey there. For example, the bats spent 19% of their time foraging in the broadband noise compartment and 81% of their time in the quiet compartment. Of the 3 noises, the broadband noise repelled the bats the most, followed by the reed vegetation noise, then the traffic noise. The researchers explained that the broadband noise contained higher frequencies than the traffic noise did. Thus, it repelled bats more. In addition, the broadband noise was continuous, whereas the traffic and reed vegetation noises were not. The researchers concluded that foraging areas that are close to highways and other sources of intense broadband noise are less suitable as foraging areas for the greater mouse-eared bat and many other European and North American bat species that find food by listening to prey sounds. Roadless space is becoming more scarce, and the researchers suggest that noise reduction measures or provision of alternate bat foraging habitats will need to be considered when environmental impact surveys are conducted for highway planning. They also state that additional studies will bring a better understanding of the impact of man-made noise on bats that find prey by passive listening and those that find prey by using echolocation